Hello and welcome to Center Ice Cardcast, your one-stop podcast shop for all things hockey cards. My name is Eric Andrews, also known in the hobby as Hammerhawks, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow hobbyist, Aaron Goldstein, better known throughout the hobby as Crease Collector. So just to kick things off tonight, we wanted to talk about another big card that has recently made its way to the auction block. Aaron, do you want to just share a little bit more about that card?
Definitely. But first off, I just want to add this in for those listeners listening to us right now. This episode, I believe it's number 13, will put us over the 10,000 download mark for this podcast. So just want to give a shout out to you guys listening. Just a big thank you, just for getting us this far. We don't know too much about podcasts. We're relatively new at this, but this is, a project that we think the hobby has needed, the hockey card market has needed, more specifically. So we're glad to be doing it, and we're really happy that you've enjoyed it too, based on your feedback, and we're definitely going to keep it going. And now for the big intro, I guess. For those who don't know, there was a 0506 Upper Deck Young Guns rookie card of Sidney Crosby that was graded a BGS 10 Black Label. It's a Pop 2, and it's currently listed for auction by Golden Auctions. And for those who don't know what a Black Label is, that's when a card gets graded. You've all been familiar with that. And the labels have a different color associated with them if you're going by BGS standards. Silver, gold, and then black. So a Black Label refers to a card that has received a pristine grade of 10. So that's a perfect card, quote unquote. And that all the subgrades, the surface, the corners, the edges, etc., has all received a grade of 10. So it's, like I said, a perfect card. So especially for the Crosby, that is quite a big card for not only Sidney Crosby fans, but just rookie card collectors and Black Label collectors, because I know there are a few of those out there. So the auction that's up right now on Golden Auction is ending September 20th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Like I said, it's only one of the two Young Guns to receive a BGS grading of 10 and have that Black Label. The opening bid was $1,500 US, and currently the bid stands at $3,250 US as of September 13th with 10 bids. As far as this card goes on predictions, I originally predicted around 40K US. So we'll see how that goes. A point brought up to me this week was that this card so far hasn't been marketed as well as some think it should have been. So that might cause this auction to not go as high as some people might think. I've heard around 25K. If someone could land it for that price, that would be an absolute steal of a deal. Like, I know it's a lot of money, and a lot of people, us included, can't throw around 25K for a card. But I would agree with that. If someone could nab this card for about 20 to 25K, I think that definitely is a big steal when you want to think about, Crosby in his career, and especially resale value in about 5 or probably about 10 years. A winning bid now for 25K would definitely be an incredible steal for this card. Eric, did you have any thoughts on the Crosby Black Label price?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely be interesting to see where it goes. I think having it be on Golden, like you said, definitely could limit the upside of the final sale price. Like you said, it probably hasn't been marketed quite as well as it should be at this point. But, obviously, big ticket collectors are still going to find a way to know about the card. So I don't think it'll hinder it too much. I think as far as the final price, it's really hard to say. I don't know if there has been a Crosby Young Gun Black Label that has sold publicly before.
I don't think so.
I mean, obviously, like you said, with this being one of only two Crosby Young Guns that have gotten the Black Label, it's very possible, obviously, that this copy has not publicly surfaced for sale. And, if the other one hasn't either, then we really don't have anything to go off of as far as an estimated guess as far as the sale price. But one thing that I was kind of thinking about, as we've seen over the last few months, the various prices being achieved by various cards in the hobby. And, when I saw this card and I was trying to think of, what's a realistic price that this could go for? Well, my mind immediately jumped to, okay, what does a Connor McDavid Young Gun Black Label sell for? And, I think that's a good starting point to, compare the two. But I think it's also really important to note that there are 35 McDavid Black Labels compared to 2 Crosbys.
That's crazy.
So, obviously both are, very similar cards. I mean, it's the same card, just a different year, 10 years apart. But the scarcity of the Crosby in comparison to the McDavid is pretty drastic. And just seeing how that could factor into the final price, I think really, could be a pretty big determining factor. I just looked up earlier today, and I believe the last McDavid Black Label sold, I think last month, for around 14,000 US. And again, like I said, there are 35 of those. So you have to factor in with that just taking a raw copy of the card, the Crosby outsells the McDavid anyway. And then if you get into, more common grades for that card, your BGS 9.5 and even just a gold label 10, which would be 3 subgrades of 10 and 1 subgrade of 9.5, just to make that distinguishment for listeners that might not know the difference between a gold and black label 10 pristine.
It's small, but it's significant.
Yes, it sure is. But you can kind of make that comparison between McDavid 9.5s and Crosby 9.5s and see that there definitely is a price difference there. Same with a gold label 10. So, just understanding that all things equal, a Crosby Black Label would outsell a McDavid Black Label anyway, most likely. But then you factor in that there are only 2 Crosby Black Labels compared to 35 McDavids. And that's definitely going to factor into that final sale price. So like you were saying, Aaron, I think 30 to 40,000 US is probably a fair range, I would say. I don't know that I would see it going too much more than 40,000. I mean, it certainly could, but at the end of the day, it still just is a Young Guns. It's not, a Cup RPA or a Future Watch Auto or anything like that. There are still thousands upon thousands of the Young Guns out there. Even though they aren't the black labels, it's still a very easy to come by card. Obviously, it's difficult to get that black label grade, but there's nothing stopping people from grading multiple copies of a Crosby Young Gun, at any point in the future. And I'm sure eventually there will be another 1 or 2 or, who knows how many that could get a black label down the road. So,
oh, no question.
It's obviously a very scarce card right now in terms of it being a black label, but I don't see that black label designation having quite as much pull for a card like that as opposed to, a super high-end card on its own pre-grading, that could draw a pretty big premium. So, I think around 40,000 US is probably the ceiling, maybe 50,000. But I could also see it, kind of being a little bit underwhelming and be more in that 25 range. If I had to throw out a guess, I would say maybe in the low 30s, maybe 31, 32,000 US, somewhere around there. It's probably my guess at this point. Obviously there's still a lot of time. As of when we're recording this on Sunday night, there's still a week to go, and obviously, as we've seen in the past with other huge cards, the price can jump a lot in the last day and even just in the last few minutes. So it's really hard to even make a prediction just based on where it's at right now. And it really is speculative with pretty much nothing in the past to go off of. But just kind of comparing it to, the McDavid Black Label, and just some other big cards, I think that range is probably pretty reasonable. But yeah, I mean, really, who knows? It'll be interesting to keep tabs on it over the next week and see how it goes. And with that, we'll reiterate this later, but if you guys have thoughts on that, please shoot us a message on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, just tweet us, post on our Facebook, whatever it might be. Give us your prediction for what you think that Crosby Black Label is going to sell for. We love having that interaction with you guys, like we always say, but it's especially fun for cards like this just to, hear what you guys are thinking as far as a sale price. Yeah, I know Aaron posted on our Instagram earlier this week about it, and we've already seen, a few people responding to us with their predictions. And, that's always fun, just seeing what people think a card like this is worth. So yeah, definitely be sure to do that. And let us know what you're thinking as far as a value for an epic card like this.
Definitely. I agree. Definitely go ahead and do that. And just one more note before we move on. As far as the comparison goes, the McDavid Black Label Young Guns, I believe the most recent one, Eric, you were saying, went for about 14,000. Just one more note to mention is that the print run of the McDavid Young Gun and the Crosby Young Gun is, although they are the same type of card from the same product, different years, of course, but the print run of the McDavids that year were incredibly high. So that's why we see the 35 black labels for the McDavids, whereas with Crosby, there's only been 2. Grading in the industry wasn't that predominant at that time in 0506. So there is a lot of Crosbys that are just sitting raw in people's collections from years ago. And of course, when the whole McDavid wave hit the hobby, a bunch of people were sending in their cards to get graded. And again, the print runs on the McDavid were, I'm scared to, put out a number, but there's so much more McDavid Young Guns available than there are Crosbys. So that's why we see such a low population of black label Young Guns for the Crosby, because there hasn't been as much submitted for grading. Will there be, another black label Crosby? Probably. It's not the last Crosby Young Gun to be sent into grading, so you never know. I could definitely see the uptick in numbers in the future, but not too much. Just based on the print run of the Crosby, it is a lot less, and so therefore, I guess, rarer than the McDavid Young Guns. So that's just another quick point to note there. And another point that could affect the price is that there's only 2, and I can't see that number going up too much anytime sooner in the future. So it definitely is a rare card when comparing it to a McDavid Black Label. I think they are different. Although they are the same card, the same type of rookie card, I think they are very different cards. So with Crosby's I would think, being the more valuable as far as print run, and of course Crosby and his accomplishments in his career. So it's definitely going to be an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And going off of that, like you said, the difference in the print run between the cards from those different years really is important to note. I've seen people make estimates about how
Yeah.
many McDavid Young Guns there are out there, and it's honestly just mind-blowing. I mean,
Yeah.
when you think about how many, if you look up how many McDavid Young Guns have been graded already by
It's alarming to see those numbers, and then to sort of calculate a print run off that. Comparing it to the Crosbys, like I've seen people do grading charts, a Crosby versus a McDavid Young Gun, and just seeing those population reports when comparing those cards, it's ridiculous. So go on.
Yeah. But just seeing how many McDavid Young Guns just over the last a little under 5 years at this point, how many of those have already been graded by Beckett and PSA and other graders. It's literally thousands upon thousands of cards. And, again, that's just the graded ones. There's probably just as many, if not more, that have not been graded. I know, just speaking personally for myself, I pulled a McDavid Young Guns pretty shortly after the product released in 2015. And, I still have that exact copy of the card, and it's raw, and I have no intention of getting it graded.
You don't?
I don't, just because
How come?
one of the corners is a little bit dinged. So
Okay.
I know it wouldn't do super
Makes
well.
sense.
Yeah, if it was in better condition, I definitely would.
Even just to protect it? Like you wouldn't grade it just to protect it, or?
I don't mind just having cards in one touches. That doesn't bother me. I know it bothers some people, but yeah, I'm perfectly fine with just having it in a one touch. And when I pulled it, I knew that I was keeping that card, and it was never going to leave my collection. So I don't have
Makes sense. That's fair.
I don't have any
That's
problem with
fair.
having it just stay as raw. But with that, I think it was back in March of 2019, I picked up a second copy of the McDavid Young Guns, and I have had that card ever since. And I actually just last week or a week and a half ago or so, did my first grading submission in a while.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah, you were telling me about that. The submission that you are going to send to them is quite amazing.
Yeah, and that McDavid Young Guns that I picked up in March of 2019 is in that submission, and I definitely think that that copy was in better condition than the copy that I pulled myself, which is why I opted to submit that one. But yeah, so I mean, just speaking on my behalf as someone that owns two copies of the McDavid Young Guns, only one of those is going to be graded. So, obviously, yeah, someone might pull one and say, "Oh, I'm getting it graded, no questions asked," and someone else might say, "Oh, like me, I just want this card for my collection. I don't care if it's graded. I don't care about the condition that much. I just want the card." And there might be some people that have 20 of them and say, "I want half of them graded and half of them to be raw." So
Yeah.
it's hard to really just make an estimate just purely based on how many have been graded, but that can give you a general sense of kind of how many cards are out there. And I've seen extensive conversation about this in the past, and I think when you really dig into the numbers, I think it's pretty apparent that the print run for those McDavid Young Guns seriously is probably somewhere in the vicinity. And again, we're not saying this is the print run or even that it's close or accurate in any way, but just if you're kind of adding things up and thinking about it, there's probably around like 50,000 copies of that card.
Like
Maybe
even
more,
that
maybe
estimate is
more.
probably
so
more, probably more.
so
But
so
yeah.
yeah. So I mean, you think about that, and then you compare that to the Crosby, and I mean, it's undoubtedly a scarcer card than the McDavid is. It just was not mass produced like that. I mean, obviously, a Crosby Young Guns is substantially easier to find than a Crosby Future Watch or something like that. I'm not saying there's only 1,000
No, yeah,
Crosby
like the
Young
Young
Guns.
Gun base, like of course we're not including the parallels, but just the base Young Gun is of course an easier card to find. But when you're comparing, a Crosby to a McDavid Young Gun, the Crosby one in that discussion is, the rarer card.
Yeah, without a doubt. And another thing to factor in with this too, when you're specifically looking at the grading factor of this, is we're kind of in a different era as far as card collecting and how that's done. And everything is, much more digitally inclined and just done online. And that specifically affects these cards in the sense that starting in 2015-16, Upper Deck started its EPAC program. So factoring into the print run, more cards were, being made so that EPAC could be fueled. But also with that, all of those cards that were set aside for EPAC were never actually physically packed out into packs and boxes and were never circulated amongst the hobby. Those were all just sitting in a warehouse at Check Out My Cards, ComC. So theoretically, all of those cards should be in pretty much brand new shape as they came off the production line because they haven't been inserted into packs. They haven't been bouncing around on trucks, from a LCS to a collector or, to a card show and then to a collector. And then, it was put on eBay and somebody bought it and then they traded it to somebody else.
Yeah,
It hasn't
a
been
lot less
passed.
hands.
It hasn't been passed around. So a lot of those EPAC cards, that were not circulated amongst the public are in better condition. And so you're seeing, the statistics of those cards from EPAC are generally going to be in better condition. So the odds of them getting those higher grades is a lot better than something from 10, 15 years ago, where the only way it was distributed was in the traditional sense of putting it in a pack. So, just with the less handling and all of that, and there was even a feature, I don't think it's still available anymore, but ComC used to have a feature where you could take a card from your inventory on ComC and have it sent directly to Beckett for grading. So theoretically, you could have pulled a McDavid Young Gun on EPAC, transferred it to your ComC account, and then had them send it to Beckett for grading. And that card has only been handled by the Upper Deck employee that packaged them all to send to ComC, and the ComC employee that packaged it to send it to Beckett. That's it. So just with less handling, the odds of it being in better condition is a lot greater than a card from 10 or 15 years ago that has been through, the normal distribution method. So that's just another thing to factor in with this, as well as kind of just the background and context of these cards as well.
All right, very well said. So now Eric is just going to take you through the newest release to hit the industry right now, and that is 2020-21 O-Pee-Chee.
Yeah, so we broke down 2021 MVP recently, and now the second new product for the 2020-21 season is now on the shelves, as O-Pee-Chee was released this past Thursday, September 10th. Obviously a very well-known product within the hobby. The O-Pee-Chee name has been around for decades upon decades upon decades, and it's always a very anticipated and beloved product each year, and a lot of people are very much excited to see it come out every year. And similar to last year, the hobby box configuration is 18 packs per box with 10 cards per pack. Last year was the first year they did that. It used to be, I believe, 24 packs, and even in years past, I think as many as 36 packs per box, but they've dropped it down in recent years. As far as a box breakdown, you're going to get 18 retro parallels, 12 high series short prints. So that could be your marquee rookies, your marquee legends, your season highlights, things of that sort. You're going to get 6 blue border parallels, 4 O-Pee-Chee Premier Tall Boys, 3 O-Pee-Chee playing cards, 2 retro black parallels numbered out of 100, 1 red border parallel, and 1 additional rare chase card. And like any product, it depends where you look, but generally speaking, a hobby box is going to set you back about $50 US or $70 Canadian, again, depending on where you look. As far as some of the returning staple content for the product, obviously O-Pee-Chee is very much known for its huge base set of 600 cards, including those high series short prints. As well, the retro parallels, of course, are back. And an insert set that's been in the product for a while now that a lot of people really enjoy are the O-Pee-Chee playing cards that I mentioned earlier. As far as some unique returning content, that was new to the product last year that has made its return this year are the O-Pee-Chee Platinum Preview cards and some base photo variation parallels as well. As far as new and different content, I'll start with some of the omissions from last year for this year's product. The gold border glossy parallel is gone, which has been replaced by those red border parallels I mentioned earlier. The red borders have been around for a few years now, but those were always done as wrapper redemptions. So in Canada, if you accumulated a certain number of opened packs of O-Pee-Chee, you could send those into Upper Deck through your local card shop, and you would get a redemption pack of red border parallels in return. Well, rather than doing that wrapper redemption program, they just decided to put the red border parallels actually into the product this year itself, and those took the place of the gold glossy parallels, like I said. Last year, there were the Caramel Mini cards. Those are gone and have been replaced by the O-Pee-Chee Premier Tall Boys that I mentioned earlier. And those cards also feature yellow and red parallels as well. And I also mentioned the base photo variants. The reverse negative and retro logo variations from last year are gone. And new base variants this year include the All-Star photos, warm-ups photos, and rookie year photos. And just one other omission for this year are the in-action inserts are gone this year. As far as some new content, like I mentioned earlier, the O-Pee-Chee Platinum Preview cards have returned, but this year there's actually almost the entire gamut of the O-Pee-Chee Platinum Parallels included as well. So last year, the previews they weren't even actually the base cards. They were kind of more like the rainbow parallels for O-Pee-Chee Platinum, but that was it. It was just that. There was just the one version of the preview, and that was it. Whereas this year, there's the base, there's rainbow, there's violet pixels, and then there's matte pink numbered out of 99, red prism numbered out of 50, seismic gold out of 25, orange checkers out of 15, and emerald surge out of 10. And another new addition for this year that has definitely been getting people's attention are 3D rookie cards, as well as some rookie redemption cards as well. And speaking of redemption cards, there are a couple of other redemption programs in the product. First being a glossy rookie phenoms set, and those are good for a 9-card set of 2020-21 rookie cards. That checklist hasn't been announced yet, but I'm sure it'll feature some of the top rookies and draftees from the 2021 season. As well, there is the #1 draft pick puzzle redemption cards. So how that works is if a collector is able to amass all 9 pieces of the draft pick puzzle, then those can be redeemed and you will receive an achievement card of the #1 overall draft pick from this year, presumably Alexi Lafreniere. So that's just a nice little chase for collectors and specifically Rangers collectors. Like I mentioned earlier, the O-Pee-Chee playing cards are back, but this year they've added jokers. It used to just be, the quote unquote normal cards of a playing deck being, ace through king. But like I said, this year they added jokers, and fittingly, the 2 joker cards are variations that feature Gritty, the Philadelphia Flyers mascot. So that's just a cool little touch. And then one last addition to the product this year, which has definitely created some buzz, is in the past, those red border cards I'd mentioned from the wrapper redemptions, there have been blank back versions of those through that redemption program, but they changed that this year. Those red blank backs still exist, but they are one of ones this year. And I know that, I've seen online already people saying, oh, well, since they're one of ones this year, does that mean they were one of ones in the past? The answer to that question is no. I can 110% tell you they were not one of ones in the past. Like I've said in the past, I have a pretty big collection of Ryan Dzingel, and I have 2 copies of a past year of that card. So they definitely were not one of ones in the past. But I guess since Upper Deck put them in the product this year, they wanted to add some level of scarcity to them and just add a really unique chase card. And I believe for the first time ever, we are seeing one of ones in O-Pee-Chee. So that's just an interesting thing to note. So that's pretty much the nitty gritty of the product. As far as some analysis for it, just starting with the pros, obviously having the huge base set is great for the hobby. It's great specifically for those set and player collectors, especially if you're a player collector of guys that, aren't so much, superstar players, someone like for me, like a Ryan Dzingel, like a Nicholas Hjalmarsson, guys that just don't get that spotlight a lot in some of the higher end products. It's nice to have that release each year where you can pretty much bank on your guy being in it. I know pretty much every year when Jonas Enroth was playing, he was an O-Pee-Chee.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It was great. It was a fun little chase, your 5-6 card set, if you will, is very fun. I'm very fond of my O-Pee-Chee cards in my collection, especially those blank backs, which are very hard to come by, but very fun cards.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We didn't even mention it earlier, but obviously the retro blank back cards are back as well. Those, even though they've been unannounced, which is a hint at what we'll talk about next. But
yeah, we'll get to that.
The retro blank backs have never been an announced part of O-Pee-Chee, but they've been in the product for 12 years now. So, it's kind of just a given that they're part of the product, but definitely one of the biggest draws of the product, without a doubt, is those retro blank back cards. The base design this year, I think, is a really nice, clean design. Kind of a little bit of a different design. I wouldn't say it even has a super classic or retro feel. It almost kind of feels like a modern design that's put on a retro feeling cardboard. So kind of a nice combination there, and I think they look nice. As well, like I mentioned earlier, the O-Pee-Chee Premier Tall Boys, I think it's nice to incorporate that O-Pee-Chee Premier name into the product.
Yeah, that was a fun product back in the day when O-Pee-Chee Premier was a thing.
Yeah, it's just nice to have that name around, even though there isn't a standalone release and there hasn't been for quite some time. It's just nice to see the name again. Like I mentioned, the expanded O-Pee-Chee Platinum previews, I think, is just a nice touch and just adds some nice a nice level of quality to the product, and also some nice chase cards. Especially as you're getting toward the rarer end of the spectrum with the the Emerald Surge and Orange Checkers specifically. Those are obviously extremely rare cards. So just cool to see those, and even just to be able to see what O-Pee-Chee Platinum is really going to look like this year with those parallels. I mean, you generally have a pretty good idea of what it's going to be like, but to actually physically be able to see that months and months and months ahead of time is just kind of nice. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the 3D rookie cards, I think, are just a really cool and unique addition for O-Pee-Chee specifically. I mean, obviously, we have seen 3D cards done in the past, not necessarily frequently, but you definitely have seen them. But I don't think O-Pee-Chee has ever had that. And, it's just a cool and, like I said, a unique addition for the product specifically. And I know that those have definitely been pretty well received and have been an intriguing addition. As far as a couple cons, I've seen people say that they're not really a big fan of the retro design this year, and I would kind of agree with that. They almost really don't feel retro at all. Like, they kind of just feel like a modern design that is being called the retro parallel. In years past, the retro parallels have always been a spin-off of a past O-Pee-Chee design, and
Not exactly, but like a little tweak here there, but I know what you're saying. Yeah, they
right.
were.
Right, and they couldn't be because
We'll get into that. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. I was going to mention that.
Upper Deck theoretically doesn't own all of those old O-Pee-Chee designs. They got in a little bit of trouble for the 0809 retro design because that was
Yeah.
an exact copy of the Gretzky rookie year design. Since then, they have had to take old O-Pee-Chee designs and kind of tweak, or even in some cases merge them to create their retro parallels each year. But still, you can very clearly say, okay, this design element of the retro parallels is clearly from whatever year of O-Pee-Chee, from the 60s or 70s or whatever it might be. It's apparent that, oh yeah, this design was kind of based on this design from the past. But this year, I'm not sure if there was a specific inspiration or not. I haven't gone looking through every single year of O-Pee-Chee that's been produced over the last, whatever, 70 or 80 years.
70 years, yeah.
I don't recall seeing an O-Pee-Chee design that even resembles this one. So I'm not entirely sure, the inspiration or motivation behind this year's retro design. It's extremely simple and minimalistic, which even just kind of for how cards were done back then isn't really, doesn't really fit. A lot of times they were kind of either like gaudy designs with all kinds of, added stars and things like that, or, just kind of had a lot going on, whereas the simple and minimalistic design trend, really is just kind of more in recent times. So yeah, not entirely sure on that. I've heard from a lot of people that aren't crazy about them this year, but yeah. And then I'm not a huge fan of having one of ones in O-Pee-Chee with the red blank backs. Obviously there's a very much a place for one of ones in the hobby. I'm just not sure that O-Pee-Chee is a place for that. And obviously being a player collector, it's nice to have a new one of one to chase, but it's also a little frustrating sometimes, especially if it's coming out of a low end product like O-Pee-Chee. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's nice to have that added chase card, but
It's
not
nice if you get
sure.
it. It sucks if you don't.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure it's the right place for a one of one. So yeah, but I mean, obviously, without saying it, clearly is adding value to the product. So that's obviously a great thing. Who wouldn't want to pull a one of one out of a pack or a box, right? But
Especially O-Pee-Chee.
yeah, exactly. Like, that's a huge bonus if you're able to pull a card like that. But just as far as the con component of it, just in the fact that I don't think it makes sense for the product itself, just as far as what O-Pee-Chee has been in the past, it's very much a set driven product. And, obviously there are the parallels and stuff, but pretty much throughout O-Pee-Chee's history, it's always been a very attainable product, and, obviously the blank backs in the past have been tough pulls and have been very scarce cards, but they've still been able to be had, definitely not to one of one levels. I think in some years the speculation has been that the retro blank backs have been as rare as only 5 copies, but in some years it's been upwards of 20 or 25 copies. So not super limited. Obviously there's even a huge difference between something being limited to 5 copies versus being a one of one. But yeah, not to harp on that too much. O-Pee-Chee is a great product every single year. I think the overwhelming majority of people in the hobby absolutely love O-Pee-Chee every single year, for what it stands for and for what it provides to the hobby. I think, without a doubt, it's always a success each year. I know I always look forward to grabbing those, base and parallel cards of all of my players every year. I'm always scouring eBay, the first few days after release to make sure I'm grabbing all those parallels and everything. And yeah, always definitely a fun set, and glad to see it make another return, and glad to see some fun and unique things added this year as well.
I agree. I love O-Pee-Chee. I love how you mentioned what it stands for the hobby. I totally agree on that. I'm actually writing a blog post about that. It should be up in a bit, but like just the history of what O-Pee-Chee means to the hobby, like just that brand. It's quite incredible. So to see that continue year after year and give collectors the chance to pick up cool parallels and get people introduced to the hobby and have, whether it be player collectors or set collectors, team collectors, all involved in one particular product year after year, I think is very special. And I'm definitely glad to see it cracked open every year. So just to have those topics kind of bleed into our next conversation point, like probably the main point of the episode here is we're going to talk about those types of cards, the unannounced inserts and parallel cards. Sometimes these cards are referred to as the Easter egg cards. I'm not really sure why, but that's just what people call them. Just, what are the Easter eggs in this product, or what are the Easter eggs in this product? So we've seen that in the past. We're just going to go through and get our opinions on this sometimes controversial topic in the hobby. Eric, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, so I'd love for you to start, even though you just went through that awesome run of O-Pee-Chee. What are your initial feelings about unannounced insert or parallel cards?
I'll just kind of keep it basic at this point, because I'll unpack a lot of my feelings with later questions that we're answering about this topic. But I think just at a very basic level, I think the Easter egg cards are definitely an exciting thing for products in the hobby. Who doesn't like the intrigue of not knowing what something is right away? It makes you want to learn more about it. It makes you wonder what you have, how rare is this? How valuable might it be? Things of that sort. So I think, the concept is good, whether or not things could be done differently or in a better way, or, more or less or whatever. I'll share my thoughts on that later, but I think just the general concept of having Easter eggs in products is definitely an intriguing way to add some value to products.
I definitely agree. The first time I heard about these unannounced cards were the very first, not the very first unannounced card in the hobby, but the very first run of O-Pee-Chee blank backs in 0809 O-Pee-Chee. And for those who don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, to my knowledge, the O-Pee-Chee blank backs were first inserted definitely in 0809. But the reason for the O-Pee-Chee blank back is that way back in, I believe it was, the 60s or 70s, probably earlier, to be honest, the original O-Pee-Chee cards, because the print production back then wasn't as up to par as it is now, sometimes it was quite common that complete runs of cards would be mistakenly printed with blank backs. And especially back in the day when collectors or all the kids relied on the backs of cards to learn more about their favorite players at the time, having a blank back was an extremely disappointing card, and it was just pretty much junk at that point, and it was not a fun thing to have. And as far as the manufacturer point of view, it was not something they did on purpose. It was a big mistake. And so turning the page to modern O-Pee-Chee. So in 0809, Upper Deck decided to kind of pay tribute to the history of the hobby in the cards of the past, and more specifically, obviously, the history of O-Pee-Chee, in that some cards were printed mistakenly with blank backs. So they decided to purposely produce a few runs of cards with these blank backs. And they did not tell collectors about it. And this came totally out of left field. I wouldn't be surprised if collectors who just collected in 2008, 2009 still don't know that that was done on purpose because it was not announced. People did not know that these cards existed at all. Upper Deck did not formally come out and say that we did this on purpose, but they did in fact do this and made these extra chase cards for other collectors who did know what to look for with these unannounced parallel cards, these retro blank backs. And of course, in 08, 09, they used the Gretzky rookie year. So of course, collectors seeing that old school design that was very exciting that year, especially to get your favorite player with, the Gretzky design was very, very cool. I have a couple cards myself from that 08, 09 year, and the retro set they're very cool cards, no matter which player you get. And obviously to have the extra chase of a blank back was very, very intriguing. And when these cards did start to surface, collectors didn't really know what to do with them because there wasn't really a precedent set that a card manufacturer would purposely create a card like this, an extra parallel and unannounce it for one, but also create a parallel such as the blank back it just looks, I guess, wrong in a sense. Like it's not wrong. Like I love the blank backs. I've come to appreciate their beauty, but to some collectors pulling them, like they wouldn't even know what to do, like, or what to think of, like when pulling a blank back, especially, if you're a kid, like that would be so disappointing. Even now, like in the modern hobby. So, definitely threw a lot of collectors for a loop. No doubt, I'm sure a lot got thrown out if you pulled a one-off card, because they were very rare. I'm sure a couple got thrown out. But hey, these cards are, again, they're unannounced. They have not been officially announced at any point since then. The print runs have been debated to death. I'm pretty much set on that in 08, 09, the print runs were about 5. That's my best guess. I could be wrong. For those who don't know, the backs are yellow. So if you have an 08, 09 retro card with a yellow back, definitely don't throw it out because it's definitely a cool card to pull. And since then, the print run has been debated to death, like I said. Yeah, there's probably about 5, 10, 15 out there for most years. In some years, I've heard 20, 25. So honestly, I have no idea. The second year they did that, the blank backs in 09, 10, Enroth's rookie year, I do have one, and it's a blue back. It's really, really cool. It's blue. So that's very neat. And then the other years they've been, I believe, pretty much standard. They've been the traditional, I guess, brownish kind of card stock. So definitely a very interesting card. As far as the unannounced inserts and parallels topic goes, I really like it. I love the mystery behind, getting a card and looking through the checklist and not seeing it. To some, I know that might kind of raise a couple eyebrows and kind of be, a deterrent or, a negative thing. But for me, I really enjoy it, having those kinds of cards in my collection, the what ifs of how many of these are out there. And especially if you collect, especially from O-Pee-Chee, a certain player in that set, putting together the full rainbow of parallels of your particular player and having that elusive blank back, I think has been always fun for me as a collector. And, tracking them down over the years, they've been very hard to come by. And especially, again, from a release like O-Pee-Chee, when we talked about this last episode, where it's a type of release, it's going to get a lot of people involved, whether it be, an older person or a more experienced person in this hobby, or a younger person as well, just, in their first couple of packs in the hobby. So it allows them to get involved in the hobby, but also pull these elusive cards that they might not know are elusive to begin with. So it definitely makes it more special to acquire these cards. In other products as well, there's been stuff like, photo variations that have been commanded, huge value on the secondary market, depending on which player you pull. I do really enjoy them, like I said. I feel like they're very, very fun and they're very easy to do, for manufacturers, depending on what parallel you want to create. They can be kind of tricky to spot, but I think that's kind of the beauty of it, and it definitely can create a lot of value without kind of breaking the bank if you're a manufacturer of cards. So I definitely see why it's done. And I think it's a fun little way to add value to your break. You might have to search a little harder and have sort of like a treasure hunt when looking back through your break or your case break or, what have you. But I think they're very, very good for the hobby, especially when you hear a lot of, oh, there's too many autographs in the hobby, or manufacturers have watered down memorabilia cards and then they're kind of junk right now. So I think these unannounced cards, these simpler quote unquote cards, are a great way to add value back to the product, number one, but also number two, they're a great way to bring it back to kind of a simpler time where collectors just appreciated just the card itself, like not what's on it, like not an autograph, not what is within it, like a memorabilia piece, but just simply the card. And I think these unannounced parallels, these simpler parallels, definitely bring it back to a simpler time in the hobby. Like I know that's looking really deep into a simple card or an unannounced parallel, but I think for me that's what it does. Like seeing more of these unannounced cards and seeing collectors be really excited to find out how rare these cards are and how they have to search for them, and seeing some of the values that these cards go for on the secondary market, it is a huge boost to pull these cards. But I think just across the hobby, I think it drives value up on the simple parallel card. And I think that's a very good thing, especially when they're trying to, I think as an industry, kind of not fully, but pull back a bit on the memorabilia and pull back on the autographs, because there are a lot out there. Not that there's a bad thing with that, but just I think we've seen a lot of it in recent years. And I think it's a good thing to pull it back and focus more on the base card. And while the base card has not gotten a lot of love in the past, I think this is a good hybrid to do that, to bring the hobby back a little bit. So I really think it's a good thing for the hobby, and for collectors like myself, they're very cool cards to have. So just to highlight that, Eric, I know we are kind of divided on this. I really do enjoy these unannounced, the mystery behind it, especially the mystery of the print runs. So I really do enjoy them. Eric, I just want to push it back to you and to see why you kind of dislike those types of cards.
Like I said earlier, I think the idea of them is really good, mainly for the reasons that you just very well laid out, Aaron. I think just adding that value to products, adding that intrigue, and just getting
Right.
back to focusing on cards themselves and kind of going back to a simpler time in the hobby. I think those are all excellent reasons for including them within products. I think, in some ways they are done well, but I think they have also, kind of gotten a little bit out of hand in a way over the last few years too. It feels like every single product has at least, one, two, three, if not more Easter eggs built into the product. And in some products it's more like four, five, six Easter eggs
Yeah,
in the product.
it is a lot. It is a lot, especially in recent years, the past 2 years.
Yeah. So I don't really like the trend of it, and just how much of it there is, and how much there has been, and it seems like there will be moving forward. I think like how you're talking about the kind of the quote unquote original modern Easter eggs of those 0809 retro blank backs from O-Pee-Chee. I think those are the perfect example, to talk about with these, and kind of explaining the rationale behind them and why they exist. It was great hearing the history about those too. But if you look at since the 0809 retro blank backs, and moving forward, the first whatever 5, 6, 7, 8 years after that, there really weren't too many Easter eggs in other products. I mean, there might have been some here and there, but it was kind of, for a while uncommon for something to just kind of pop up
Yeah,
unexpectedly in a product.
and now
Whereas,
it's a trend. Like now it's
yeah,
kind of evolved into a trend.
yeah, exactly. Now it's like, okay,
It's a thing now.
this new product is coming out. How many Easter eggs are going to be in it?
Yeah, I
Um,
know what you mean.
and even, myself as a player collector, it's kind of been frustrating at times for me, even wondering, okay, this Easter egg came out. Is there one of these cards of my player? I look specifically at last year's O-Pee-Chee Platinum, so 2019-20. So I guess technically this year's O-Pee-Chee Platinum,
Yeah,
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 depending on how you want to look at it. But, Jacob Slavin was in the base set, so he had the full gamut of all the base parallels. Well, this year there were, the pond hockey Easter egg parallels. And ever since release, I thought that there was a Jacob Slavin pond hockey parallel out there. Well, I just learned earlier this week that that's not true, and that they're only for a select number of players in the set. And really, the only way that that kind of became known was because of the product coming out on EPAC, and EPAC has a full checklist of all of the cards in the product. So for however many months between when the product first released in person in a hobby sense to when it released on EPAC this past week, I think, that entire time I thought that there was a Slavin pond hockey parallel out there. And then, I just now found out, well, actually, no, there isn't. So for me, that was a sigh of relief not having to track down that card, because I'd never
They're
seen.
nice cards, though. They're really nice cards.
Yeah, they're very nice cards. They look great. But I think that's just part of the issue, is almost in a way, especially now that they're so common, that just that misunderstanding and lack of knowledge about them is almost a detriment in some ways. I believe, that I'm a very well-educated person within the hobby. I'm very aware of what's going on. I've been in this hobby for 17 years now, over 17 years. So, the fact that someone like me spent however many months on end trying to
searching for that card
that doesn't even exist is kind of just like, really? Like, why something's wrong with that, I think. Like, if you want to do the unannounced cards, that's fine. Maybe, after a few weeks, release a checklist or something, like, just so people know what's out there, it kind of like acknowledge them in some fashion. Obviously the blank backs have been a thing forever, seemingly at this point, going back to 0809, and they have never been announced, but it's just kind of common knowledge that they're going to be part of O-Pee-Chee every year. But in a lot of other products, especially for the newer Easter eggs, a lot of people just aren't aware of them and don't even know what they have. I literally still see people post on Facebook in 2020, so 12 years after O-Pee-Chee Retro Blank Back started, people will pull a retro blank back and be like, oh, should I send this back to Upper Deck? I think they made a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of mystery behind that. Like, I definitely see how it can go the other way and be a detriment. But I know what you mean. But like with the blank backs, I think they're good cards for the hobby. I think they're very cool. But
Oh, I love the blank backs. I love the blank backs. Like,
they're awesome, right?
Don't get me wrong. I love the blank backs. I love chasing them every year. And I think that, in O-Pee-Chee, something like that, not only just because of the type of product it is, but also the history behind it.
Right.
Makes total sense. And I love that. But I think just the fact that it's becoming every single product, there's, 3, 4, 5 Easter eggs in any given product, and no one really has much insight on them. And I understand, that is the intention of them. That's how they're supposed to be. But I think just with how much of it is, it's kind of, in my mind, achieving the opposite result of the intention of them. And
it's too much to keep track of. Like with O-Pee-Chee, it was, you knew O-Pee-Chee is going to have something. It would be, the blank back. And if they were to add on 1 or 2 every year or something, it's easy to keep track of because to look out for it in O-Pee-Chee. But when it's every single product, it's like, I don't know what to expect when this product's going to be released. And you have, as many products as we see every year, to keep tracking a different Easter egg kind of every year. It's like with no sort of rhyme or reason and no sort of history behind it or trend, that it could be quite overwhelming, especially when it's seemingly in every product.
Yeah. So I think it's just kind of, where is the line with it? I think kind of a similar thing with that is very much, the trend and the focus on retro inspired cards. I think there's very much a time and a place for them. Like we mentioned, recently, I love the 20th anniversary cards and MVP. I think those are awesome.
Those are really good. Yeah, those are really good. I think MVP is a product that, if you want to turn that into a O-Pee-Chee Part 2, like when it comes to, an affordable, fun product, I think, O-Pee-Chee MVP can kind of be that Easter egg-ish, bring the love back to the base and the base parallel type product. Like, keep it a simpler product. I think those would be 2 to kind of focus on. Other products, if you want to do an Easter egg, maybe UD1 and UD2, like I think, but I think if you want to add an Easter egg in every product, I think it kind of diminishes the fun or the uniqueness of it. But again, yeah, I definitely do think there is a line. And so I definitely think we can have some common ground on that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one of my biggest issues with them is just the frequency that they're, happening at this point. I kind of like seeing products just like own what it is and focus on that and do it well rather than trying to incorporate all kinds of different things into it. Again, I'm not saying I don't like Easter eggs at all and I wish they didn't exist. I'm not saying that at all. And I don't even have a problem with every single product having an Easter egg in it. I think that's fine. It's just sometimes it gets a little bit much when there's 3, 4, 5 plus Easter eggs in every single product where it gets to the point
Yeah, I know what
where
you're
it's like,
saying.
all right, like, even like we said, O-Pee-Chee, I think is very much the place for Easter eggs. But, just going through, I'll look right now back at my notes. I mean, obviously we have the retro blank backs, but you've got the O-Pee-Chee Premier Tall Boy Red Parallels, I believe, were unannounced. You have all of the base variations were unannounced. So I think that's 5 or 6 right there. So we're already at 7 or 8. You've got all of the O-Pee-Chee Platinum preview cards that were unannounced. So that's, another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 right
It's weird
there.
that they went with the parallels this year. Like that surprised me. Like
Yeah.
that I think is a lot.
Yeah. That was a lot. I like them, but it
I like
does.
the way they look.
Yeah, oh yeah. It did make me think about, even when I was making my list of pros and cons, which one to put it in. I really wasn't sure. I like them. I think they are a nice addition, but I think they might have gone a little overboard on them. But who knows? I still think they're cool cards.
The
But
preview cards, like, do they say preview on the back like they've done in
yes,
the past? Okay.
yeah. So they
Those
have
are kind of cool.
yeah, they
Yeah.
have this year. They have a unique card number on the back. I can't
Okay.
remember the prefix and everything, but and so it has the card number. It's whatever, like PRE dash the player's name,
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah,
something
so it
like
can
that. I
distinguish it from the actual set.
right. I don't remember the prefix, and then underneath that it says preview as well. So it's
Okay.
very clear. If you turn it over, look at the card number, it's a preview.
And plus the
There's
pictures will probably be different, but who knows?
right, right. Yeah, I would assume so. But yeah, so you're already at about 15 there. You've got the 3D
Yeah, it's a
rookie
lot.
cards and rookie redemption cards. So there's 2 more. You got the red blank backs, the O-Pee-Chee playing card jokers. So I mean, just within O-Pee-Chee, like literally not exaggerating, there's about 20 different Easter eggs within it.
Yeah, it's a lot. But like for O-Pee-Chee, I think you can get away with that. I kind of like in O-Pee-Chee that many unannounced Easter egg cards because the set is so huge. And,
Yeah,
I think, it kind of, creates a lot of value in the set. You're getting a lot of cards. A lot of them will be, base cards. I think this drives the value up, especially for an affordable product. You could really get your money's worth with, a box or a case of cards, I think, depending on who you get. And I think it's been a long time for when we've seen that, when you open up a box of cards and you really get hit upon hit after hit. I think that's kind of becoming a little bit extinct nowadays, with the 4-pack cards and things like that. So I think it's kind of refreshing, like getting so many hits again in a product. So I think if that's the way to do that in such a large product like O-Pee-Chee, I think that's okay. Similar to MVP, if a similar thing, maybe not 20, but 5, 10, I think that would be okay. And again, it drives up the value of of your break. And I think that's definitely a plus. And you're gaining back the value and the appreciation for these simpler cards. And I think that's definitely a good thing. But yeah, it is a lot. I don't want to see that in other products, but I think for O-Pee-Chee, it's okay. And I think that's where we differ a little bit when it comes to these Easter egg cards for this particular product. But I like them. I think it's cool. And especially compared to this year and last year, it's always cool to see what Upper Deck is going to come up with when they, subtract a few and then add a couple more. But when it comes to O-Pee-Chee, I kind of like that a little bit. And yeah, it's definitely fun to see. Like another one I just wanted to touch on was, Eric, I know you love and hate them, but in 1819, Upper Deck did an unannounced retro card, and it wasn't the blank back this time, although they were there. They did the unannounced retro scratch off card. And for what those were, for those who don't know, they did the retro parallel, and they had a retro blank back, but they also did a scratch off where the retro card looked exactly the same on, the front and back, but the name of the player had this gray scratch off material on it. And, a collector could, if they wanted to, scratch off the scratch off area and to reveal the player's name. Of course, you know who the player was already, but it's an added kind of mysterious parallel that was unannounced. And again, same thing with the retro blank back. So there were it was the first year they did them, and last year they did them, but yeah, in 1819, and probably about 5 exist. Yeah, I think 5 would be the lowest amount, maybe 10, but those cards right there, I think those are fun cards. I know for player collectors, they're a nightmare, but I think that's a really cool way to drive value. So, yeah.
Yeah, and with those, that was very much a tribute to the 1980-81 O-Pee-Chee cards.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know where they got that from.
Yeah, that's how the
Very cool.
80-81.
Were they all scratch off, like the
Yeah,
base? I guess
yep. The
that's
entire
cool.
base set. I don't know if you can picture what I'm talking about, but they had that design where the player's name was featured inside of a puck, and it's
Oh, those. Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
the
Okay,
Ray
so they were
Bork
basing it off that. Yeah,
Mark Messier rookie year. So it was based
yeah,
off
yeah.
of that.
Okay,
Makes perfect sense. Again, like we've said, I
right.
think a product like O-Pee-Chee is the perfect place to do these types of things, especially if they're very clear nods to something done in the past. Makes a ton of
Yeah,
sense.
especially O-Pee-Chee with a big history.
Yeah, I mean those specific scratch-off parallels from 1819, I know were not very well.
Yeah, they're nightmares.
They were not well received. I have yet to see a single copy of any of my players for those cards. Definitely scarce. They were scarcer than the blank backs were, without a doubt. But yeah, and then I wanted to go back to some of the photo variations and just how those add value to a product. One of the new photo variations for O-Pee-Chee this year, like I mentioned, is the All-Star photo variation. And, for me, Jacob Slavin was an all-star in 2019-20. So obviously he has an all-star photo variation card in O-Pee-Chee in this newest release. And, obviously once I knew that the all-star photo variations were going to be a thing, I figured that he would have one. And finally one popped up on eBay earlier today, and I, without really thinking about it, just hit the buy it now and snatched it up. And, for the person that opened that box, that's not a hit card. It's just kind of an extra card. But, that card, I'll just disclose it. That card, got him an extra 25 US out of his break because he sold it to me for 25 US.
Yeah,
So
especially for O-Pee-Chee, that's a huge chunk of coin, like for an O-Pee-Chee pull.
yeah. I mean, so, and again, that's not even like a listed hit of the box, and that card paid for half of the cost of that box for him. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it definitely adds that value. And then just turning to one kind of last topic to talk about as far as the unannounced inserts and parallels is the mystery behind the information that's available with the cards. Obviously with them being unannounced, there is not any information officially being released about the cards. And, while that obviously generates that mystery and intrigue behind them, I think that a lot of times it can actually kind of do some more damage than good in a way, mainly when talking about print runs for cards. A lot of times I've seen people say, oh, this card, there were probably this many of them this one year, and then, this one year they were different, and then this other year, well, oh, now they're actually serial numbered. So does that mean in past years they were all this? No, it doesn't. Like it varies from year to year. There's no set amount, of cards, that it's consistent every year or anything. Just looking at the blank backs, from what I've heard, And again, it varies based on who you talk to. From what I have heard, though, the 0809 retro blankbacks, I think, if I recall from what I've heard, was a print run of about 15 of them. And then I believe 0910 was the rarest they've ever been. And I think most people kind of believe that those had a print run of 5, like probably,
Really?
yeah, probably no more than 5. And that's been the rarest they've ever done them. And then since then, they've kind of increased and have been to varying levels over the years. I think some years they've been as high as 20 or 25. Other years they've probably been more around 10 or 15. So it kind of just varies based on the year.
And depending if you got a base or a rookie?
Yeah, there might even be variation within that. I think it's probably consistent throughout the 600 card set. I could be wrong.
Probably.
There's no way of knowing that, but
No,
I,
I've heard different things. I've heard the kind of the opposite, like 0809 being the rarest as opposed to the other years. But again, who knows?
yeah. But I mean, I know that there's definitely been years where they are more plentiful than others,
Yes,
without a doubt.
definitely.
Um,
For sure.
I've had years where, I've seen 4, 5 plus copies of one of my players, and there are some years where I have multiple copies of them, like I said earlier, and there are some years where I still have never seen a copy of one. Could some of that just be luck of the draw? Maybe,
Probably a bit of both.
yeah,
Print runs also,
it's
people not knowing because it's O-Pee-Chee is such an open product as far as who opens it. You don't know. Like for all we know, there could have been roughly the same amount of blank backs each year. Not always, but then of course as collectors, we find a varying degree of scarcity when it comes to our particular players based on whatever year. So you really don't know, and that's kind of the mystery behind it.
Yeah. And I think just also with that, with the lack of official information about them, just creates a lot of confusion about the cards too. Specifically, I think of, this year's red blank backs are a really good example of, they are numbered 1 of 1 this year, and so
Yeah.
you're naturally going to have people that assume that past years were 1 of 1s as well, but that is not true. And that's the case for, Easter eggs and other products. I think of the SP Authentic Black cards,
Those are another interesting one. With the Future
specifically.
Watch auto patches,
Yeah,
this year being a 1 of 1, and the last year when they started it were unnumbered. So that
correct.
just automatically begins the whole debate of, are these Future Watch auto patches 1 of 1s? Like I believe someone pulled the KK this morning. They posted on Hobby Insider
Yes, yes.
their Future Watch auto patch from last year, and even I caught myself thinking the same thing. Like, oh, like that's a 1 of 1, right? Because this year's Future Watch auto patches are numbered 1 of 1s. So I'm thinking to last year, like, oh, are they a 1 of 1? Honestly, they might be, but maybe not.
Yeah. And there's been, a lot of misunderstanding about that, and kind of a guideline that I've heard, over the last few years. And again, this hasn't officially been stated by Upper Deck, but I specifically recall hearing that a pretty prominent Upper Deck employee at one point said to somebody in some fashion, again, this was years ago, I don't remember the exact context, but clearly told somebody that any unannounced, unnumbered card that Upper Deck produces within recent years, they're back 10, 15 years ago, there were some exceptions to this, but in the last 5 years or so, any unannounced or any unnumbered card, where they did not specifically state a print run, whether it was actually printed on the card or if they just said, yeah, these aren't serial numbered, but there's this many of them. So if it wasn't that case, if it was just purely unnumbered, unannounced, whatever it might be, any of those cards have a minimum of 5 copies. That was told to somebody by a prominent Upper Deck employee that knows a thing or two about how Upper Deck operates, and that was their policy. Again, that hasn't been officially announced by Upper Deck. It hasn't been, it really isn't publicly recognized. I've actually direct messaged Upper Deck's account on Twitter and have asked that question to them multiple times in the past. And I have gotten that answer kind of in a roundabout way. They didn't want to officially say that, but they more or less said that.
Yeah,
Um,
they're very tight-lipped about that stuff for good reason. Like, I would not want to disclose the print runs either, but I mean, that's just my opinion.
yeah, but I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding about that, and I've shared that information with other people and literally shared screenshots of those conversations I've had with them, and people just refuse to believe that information. And it's like, okay, well, why would they lie about that? Like they're not, like why are you
No, yeah,
refusing to accept this information just because you want to believe that something's rarer than it is? Like that doesn't make any sense. If anything, Upper Deck would want to lie the other direction and say that something is more rare to create more buzz around it and create more value for it. So, I think if they're telling you something, I mean, obviously you'd hope it's true anyway, but even if it wasn't, it's in the wrong direction. So I think not discussing print runs in general, I understand that and that's fine. But when you have all of these unannounced cards and then people are speculating, from year to year based on information from a different year's product, it just creates all of this confusion and misunderstanding and incorrect assumptions about other cards, and I just don't think that's good for the hobby, especially for newer collectors. If a newer collector sees this year's Future Watch auto patch black cards that are numbered 1 of 1, you know like you said, Aaron, it's well within reason that almost anybody is just going to jump to that conclusion and say, oh, well, does that mean that they always have been? And I'm not saying that's an unfair assumption, but we don't know that that's true based on the policy that I've heard that they use. I don't think it's true, but with any of these unannounced cards, there's really just no way of knowing. And I think in a way, Upper Deck kind of owes it to collectors to an extent to have a little bit more transparency with some things. I understand the reasoning why they don't. I understand, the intention of the Easter eggs is that they are mysterious. But when there's all of this misunderstanding amongst people for a number of different reasons, it's kind of, it kind of makes you think about how effective is this idea really when there's so much confusion and misunderstanding about them. So, I think that's really my biggest beef with them. As far as Easter eggs and stuff, like I said, there are certainly some Easter eggs that I really enjoy and I think are great additions to the hobby every single year. Things like the O-Pee-Chee retro blank backs and things of that sort. I look forward to every single year. I really enjoy collecting them, but I think there are some that I just don't see a place in the hobby for it nearly as much as there is now, especially given the confusion and misunderstanding that a lot of them have been causing over the last year or two.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming through on a couple of those points. I would say that, like, I would like Upper Deck to kind of keep going on what they're doing, and not announce them and kind of keep the mystery going on these cards. As far as print run, though, I do kind of agree. Like, if a collector comes to Upper Deck and asked about the print run, or a couple people do ask, like, giving a range would be, I guess, fair, because then it keeps that rarity or that elusive card kind of, still mysterious if you give a range, but also, still, hits home that these cards are still rare. But then again, if you open up the floodgates to, as far as Upper Deck's standpoint on, okay, employees, you can give people a range if they come to you asking, like, say, for example, customer service people, whatever, or, social media people, because obviously they'd be, like, there's a lot of departments in Upper Deck. It's a big company. And so giving people the free knowledge to give it out to people when asked, I think would be fair. But I mean, if information gets around the company of the actual print runs, could something slip through the cracks there and create some other buzz? Like, oh, this person gave me a range of 5 to 25. Well, this person gave me a range of, oh, there's 5, 100%. It could create, a different set of problems that Upper Deck might not want to deal with. So I kind of get why they don't. But again, whether they do or they don't, it kind of creates problems either way. But I kind of like what they're doing. So I'll definitely disagree with you on that sense. Like I get what you're saying. Like I totally agree on some of your points, and the confusions that it can bring. But I think opening up the print run doors, so to speak, I'm not sure if that's the best way to go about it. Maybe a good range. If they can find a way to safely go about it and give collectors information when asked, but still create this mysterious new parallel, I think that would kind of be the best of both worlds. Will we see that in the future? Who knows? But it's definitely an interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah, well, I think even with that, like, I'm not even saying I want to see them release print runs. I don't think there's a
Not
need
not
for that.
officially release it, but like kind
I
of on
think
the side. I'm not, I get what you're saying though.
I think even just, if they were, to say, hey, there has been this rumor, over the last few years that,
Kind of stomp it, I
yeah,
guess.
either do, like, just say, acknowledge something about it, say, yes, that rumored policy that we have, that there's at least 5 of anything that is not, having a
Yeah.
stated print run. I That's all I want. Like, I want something to just kind of give some
Yeah.
clarity.
So it clears the air, but also keeps that parallel rare and keeps the mystery going. So I guess kind of the best of both worlds scenario.
Yeah, and even I've heard that policy only applies to non-autograph or memorabilia cards, and that policy may or may
For
not be
sure.
different for
Yeah.
autograph or memorabilia. So just kind of having, even if you just said for the non-autograph and memorabilia cards that don't have a stated print run, there are at least 5 of them. That's not
Right. If you're
saying,
talking about these
you
rare
know,
parallels.
and that goes from rare parallels to base cards. I mean, obviously, yeah, there's more than 5 copies of a base card,
Yeah. So it
but
could create some confusion. Or if there's a slight difference in, a base parallel, but obviously, they're not going to number it, you know, could that be, um, cause for concern for Upper Deck? Like, a simple red parallel. Oh, there's no less than 5. It's like, well, it's not that rare either. So I guess
right.
it kind of, it's a weird mix,
Yeah, but I think if there was just some way of publicly and clearly stating that, just because you say there's at least 5 of something does not mean there are 5 of it.
Of
you know.
course.
So I think just if they did something like that, I think that would be kind of the ideal way to handle it and just provide some sense of clarity with it. Especially if that actually is a policy that they actually use and have and follow, you know, why not make people aware of that? So there's just a little bit of understanding about what's going on. I don't think there's any harm in doing that, especially when it seems like at least some people in the hobby already have that insight. I know I've talked with Jeremy Lee of Sports Cards Live about that before, and unless something has changed in the last few months, I'm pretty sure that Jeremy is of the belief that that policy is accurate as well. And obviously Jeremy is a pretty well versed and knowledgeable person within the hobby, and has some pretty good connections. So I think it's just kind of frustrating at times to, I've had times where I've been on Facebook or whatever trying to tell people about that, and they just refuse to listen to it because they haven't seen anything official about it, and they've only seen 2 copies of the card so far,
Right.
so there's
Right.
definitely not 5 of them. Well,
Right.
what good does that do? So I think just, if there's some generic statement that can be made that doesn't even apply to a specific parallel or a specific Easter egg, just a generic statement that says, okay, any non-autograph, non-memorabilia, or even if it does include those cards too, whatever it might be, just clear the water a little bit, say anything unnumbered has at least this many copies. That's all we'll say.
Right.
That at least
Right.
addresses the problem.
Right. No, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair point. Just like always, at the end of our episodes, we just want to turn it back to you guys and ask you some questions. What do you predict the Sidney Crosby 0506 Young Guns BGS 10 Black Label will sell for? I know there's been varying opinions on that. So if you want to throw some numbers at us, definitely go for it. What are your thoughts on the new 2021 O-Pee-Chee? What do you like or dislike about the product? Will you be opening any or collecting any cards from the product? What are your feelings about our main topic, which are the unannounced inserts and parallel cards? Do you like or dislike the idea, or maybe some specific examples of these types of cards? Like, for example, the 1819 O-Pee-Chee Retro Scratch Off. Do you like those type of cards? Like that type of thing. Are there too many of them in the hobby or not enough? Would you like to see more? Do you like the mystery behind them? Or do you wish that more information was just made available, like whether it be publicly or otherwise? We're definitely going to post these questions up on our social media accounts, so definitely keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, so that'll wrap it up for episode 13. Like Aaron mentioned at the top, we just really want to thank you guys for the support that you've given us, over these first 12 or 13 episodes, and just how receptive you guys have been to the podcast and the interaction that we've been getting and the feedback. It's been really encouraging for us, and we're really glad that you guys are really enjoying it. Obviously, we're just doing this because we enjoy doing it, and we want to provide something of value to the hobby. It's not like we've monetized this and we're making all kinds of money off of it.
Definitely not.
No.
Definitely not.
That'd be nice though. If you guys, want to drop us some checks, feel free. But
yeah.
No, that's not why we're here. We do it because we enjoy doing this for you guys. We like providing content for you guys and sharing our thoughts with the hobby too. So yeah, like always, please be sure to follow us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Center Ice Cardcast, and on Twitter at Center Ice CC. And like always, Aaron can be found on Twitter and Instagram as Crease Collector. Please also be sure to subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice to make sure you never miss a future episode. Until next time on Center Ice Cardcast, keep collecting those hockey cards.